actually, that's fine. And introduce them into the gallery or into the cinemas or into the theatre, or to engage in a deeper way.
Another question, because again, that relationship between a trading space and a social space, was a conscious decision taken to allow the space to be much bigger than you'd normally expect from a gallery space? If you go on a Sunday, there are families reading the paper and having a cup of coffee, and they take a lot of space. There doesn't seem to be there's no drive for people to feel they have to leave because other people are coming in.
Yeah, that was a really key decision in terms of that capital redevelopment, to concentrate on that social space, to make it big, welcoming, but also flexible, as we saw there, I think, in terms of being able to form those smaller spaces where more intimate things can happen. Really key part of the decision making. And not an easy decision to make, actually. Yeah.
The types of activities that go on in the social space, and the more formal ones, does Chapter charge the user groups for those, or is it just allow them to materialize?
It's very rare that there's a charge for things that happen in the social space. I'm just trying to can't think of a quick example.
May you live in interesting times.
Yeah, yeah. There are some exceptions to that, but usually everything that happens in those social spaces are free. Yeah.
In terms of the sort of delivery of the cafe function, is that done is that in-house or is that franchised out?
It's in-house. It was franchised out for many years. Chapter brought it back in about 8 years ago, and we failed miserably for about 2 years. We lost money when we brought it in-house, and you'll often find that when people bring it in-house. Now it's very successful. So it's getting the mix right, and if you get the mix right with both cafe and bar, actually it's a very good income generator. Okay, I think we're ready to join up.
Yeah. Carol, do you want to do an introduction? And onto the main screen. Ooh, it's a big one. There we go.
Hello, Deeksha.
Hey, Carol.
I'm just going to introduce you, and then it'll be over to you. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Washington, D.C. So a little bit about Woolly Mammoth. So Woolly Mammoth is a multi-award winning theatre based in Washington, D.C. And it's known equally for its challenging new theatre productions, but how it also engages in very deep and meaningful ways with people of different backgrounds and ages. We're talking to the wonderful Deeksha Gaur, who's Woolly Mammoth's Director of Marketing and Engagement. And she's going to talk us through how Woolly have activated, I suppose, their mission and their values to engage with their audiences. Over to you, Deeksha.
Great. Bear with me for 30 seconds as I try to pull up a presentation on the Hangout.
Oh, screen share. Deeksha, we're gonna while you're talking, we're gonna mute the mic on this end. So if you've got any questions, there might be like a little pause while we unmute.
Sounds good.
Doctors. Yeah.
Sounds good. So hopefully this presentation itself won't take very long, and then we can spend some time chatting about it. Okay, do you see the presentation?
Not yet. Yes, we do.
Fantastic.
Good to go. I'll mute now. Take it away.
Great. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about how Woolly Mammoth started to really activate its space to promote engagement and to grow our audiences. And even just to a certain extent, though this was certainly not our primary goal, to drive you know, the business forward, so generate some revenues. The pictures you see here are of our lobby and of a lobby experience around a particular show, which I'll talk about in a second. So really quickly, did you just see the change of slide?
Yes.
Oh, great. Fantastic. It's all working. You know, I think that I'll talk in a few minutes about the specifics of Woolly and why Woolly decided to take on this new strategy. But I think that there are some general lessons and sort of general principles that we were pretty aware of as we embarked on this adventure, and I think they're pretty universal. So very quickly, you know, obviously it can generate more income for your organization. Perhaps a little more importantly, it introduces you to a whole new audience and allows you to grow. Another sort of side benefit has been the sort of prestige value. So the you know, Woolly has always had a niche in DC for its sort of innovation and risk-taking, but this is something that has spread across the country. Our reputation has spread across the country, and you know, now all the way to Wales. So so prestige is a big factor. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is this sense of belonging, which is sort of this idea that your audiences are not only growing, but they're feeling more connected to you, and they see your space more as a sort of home for them. So these are sort of four main factors that really sort of drive sort of our outcomes, or where we what we hoped would happen as we embarked on this adventure. Okay, so I'm going to take you on a brief detour now into the corporate world, and this has also been sort of pretty influential in our thinking as we think about our what we call our connectivity strategy, which is this engagement strategy. And what you have here is the Nike ID studio, not the store, the studio in New York City. And, you know, right there it says customize your own. It's all about creating your own experience. And not only can you come here to buy shoes, but you come here to sort of activate your experience. You meet celebrities, you watch concerts, you get inspired, and then you can actually create the tools that will help you go and activate your inspiration. So this is sort of, so you're starting to see, this is not new, but in the corporate world, how spaces are being activated. Another great example, I love this example, Abercrombie and Fitch. I'm trying to remember if I used to live in London, and I don't think it was there at the time, but when I was a teenager. But you know, they take their sort of activating their spaces to an extreme. They create a club-like atmosphere in their stores. It's not only designed to appeal to a certain demographic, you know, the dark, the lights, the music, the perfume, but it's actively meant to keep out others. So, you know, a little offensive, but still really exciting in terms of what you can do when you activate your space. And a silly little example of that, I hope this elicits a little bit of a chuckle. That's my little sister and her friend when the Abercrombie store opened in Singapore, and you know, they had all their models there, and all the high school girls were there every day trying to take their pictures with these handsome men and create their own experiences. So it's happening, and there's something to be learned from them. So of course, a lot of this comes from this idea of the experience economy, and I just posted this picture of this book because I was really caught, sort of drawn to the tagline, "Work is theater and every business a stage." So this fundamental principle that's embraced by all the corporate giants really uses theater, the arts and culture as a sort of building block for how to do business. So it seems to me that there's no one really better placed to do this than we are. Okay, so let's get specific. So we're Woolly Mammoth Theater Company. We've been around since 1980 in Washington, D.C., as Carol mentioned. We have been known for the last 34 years, for doing really sort of risk-taking and edgy new work. But over the last 5 to 7 years, we've really gained a reputation nationally for doing really innovative work, sort of in our sort of administration and institutional side as well. And I just wanted to take a minute to talk about that moment that led us to really activating our mission and values through our public space. So we were entering our 30th year, so this is about 4 or 5 years ago, and our artistic director, Howard Charlowitz, felt there was something that was really missing. So to give you a little sense of where that gap was, Woolly's mission is to ignite an explosive engagement between theater artists and the community, implementing new ways of using the artistry of theater to serve the people of DC. Okay, so this phrase explosive engagement, what does it mean? I mean, we knew that we were creating great work. We knew that there was something explosive happening on our stage, and we knew that we were using new ways of creating new ways of using artistry, of theater, but maybe the other side of explosive engagement, i.e. the audience, was not something that we had paid particular attention to. And Howard really felt that without this other side, this community side, if that was something that we didn't pay attention to institutionally, not just as a marketing department, but as an institution as a whole, then really we couldn't be fulfilling our mission. So that's where it all started. And in order to figure out what that meant, we held a 2-day conference, before my time, but a 2-day conference on theater and democracy and what it means to engage your community. And we had a number of speakers, artists, playwrights, creators, audience members talk about what they had experienced at Woolly and around the country, and really just engaging thinkers on the subject to come in and share their thinking with us. So what that led to was a sort of four-pronged connectivity strategy. So the idea was that explosive engagement necessitates the most vital, the most engaged audiences. So another way of saying that is that in order for that moment in the room to be as electric as possible, you need the most keyed up and tuned up and excited audiences to provide an energy that the actors can feed off, and vice versa. So that led us to ask these questions. For every play we do, who is the play for, and what is the conversation we want to have around the play? Who needs to be in the house to activate that conversation? So there really need to be people for whom the conversation has meaning or personal relevance in order that they can, really have the conversation be at as high a level as possible. How do we prime our audience to be the most dynamic and energized? And how best can we co-create meaning with our audiences? And we put that all together and created a philosophy called connectivity, we hired somebody to be our connectivity director, and they live sort of what we like to say, they live in the space between marketing and artistic. In fact, they live in all the spaces in between the departments at the theater. And their primary job is to answer these questions. So the part that we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about today is what we call designing audiences, where the connectivity director really goes out and seeks those audiences for whom the play will have the most relevance. What we will be talking about is, once we have those audiences, how we prime them to be the most dynamic and energized, and how best we co-create meaning with our audiences. Great. Let me just take a sip of water. So for us, we've spent the last 4 or 5 years experimenting with different strategies, and we're still experimenting, but we found some sort of best practices. So for each show, we like to activate our space using 3 principles: insight, interactivity, and shareability. Now, we may focus more on one or the other for any given show, but ultimately those are the 3 principles that we're working around. So this, I'll just give you a couple of fun examples. This is really focused on the interactivity and insight. And we did a show about the rapture set in a big box craft store called A Bright New Boise. And so we wanted people to really engage in these questions. It was about a sort of evangelical, extreme Christian trying to rebuild a relationship with his son, and they both worked in this craft store. So this was a great, these were sort of installations that lived all over our lobby, whereby people could participate in crafting activities to answer questions about how they viewed the world. So some of the questions were: in the workplace, I refuse to discuss spirituality, sexuality, morality, or the economy. And then each pin corresponded with each answer, and people stuck in the pin that they believed the most. Which exclamation would you rather never hear again? For Christ's sake, or for fuck's sake? What's a more frightening prospect in the world, more big box stores or more mega churches? So there were all these activities, and people felt really engaged in what they were about to see, and begged us afterwards to sort of share the results of other participants and other audience members, because they wanted to see how it turned out weeks later. This is a slightly different example. We did a show called You for Me for You, which is about 2 North Korean sisters who try to defect to the United States. And this was an entirely new audience for us. We had never really approached the North Korean community, either the Korean community as a whole or the sort of think tanks and the sort of very smart people who were engaged around this topic. And so our connectivity director actually found this artist called Song Baeok, and Song is amazing because he was a propaganda artist for the North Korean regime, and then lost his father and sort of got disillusioned with the regime, defected to first was arrested, was let go, defected to South Korea, and used that sort of propaganda style to create satirical artwork about the regime. So we turned our lobby into an art gallery exhibiting his work. And it was a great way to not only to provide insight into what our audiences were about to see, but to sort of really connect them with these, through art, with these very powerful themes. On a much lighter note, and this speaks more to sort of shareability, we did this show by the Second City called America All Better last summer, which is obviously a joke. But we decided that we would create this photo booth with props that sort of people could play with to tell their own stories of how America is, you know, all better. So graduates moving back in with their parents, guns, the CIA listening in on all your phone calls, drugs. We just wanted to have a lot of fun with it. And people did, and they took a lot of pictures and they shared them all over their Instagrams and social media accounts, and it was a great way to spread the word about the shows. Okay, so those are experiences that we've created around each of our individual shows, and you know, there's many different ways to activate your space, and for us, certainly as we started out, we made a decision that rather than having a sort of social justice focus, what we really wanted to do, we still wanted the show to be the center of the thing. So we wanted to create these lobby experiences that were sparked around the show. But as our thinking has evolved, we've also really realized that if we want to be a home for the members of the greater DC community, we need to do more than just invite them to see a show and provide an activating experience. We actually need to hear them and address their needs. So a few examples of events that we've held. When the Trayvon Martin verdict came in, there was a lot of anger, especially in the largely Democratic community that is Washington, D.C. And I don't know if you guys know this, but Washington, D.C. is over 50% African American, and they're an often ignored majority in the city. And what we knew was that there was a lot of anger. We felt a lot of anger, and we wanted our space to be a space where we could discuss that. So our connectivity director at the time put together this town hall from Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin, a town hall on black bodies and American racism. And it started off with poetry readings and panel discussions, and then broke out into these breakout sessions led by people who were leaders in different areas. So, for example, academics, artists, you know, politicians, and everyone sort of discussed in their own circle what they felt they could do, what next steps could be. We followed this up a few months later with a series of readings, play readings, about that were created in response to the Trayvon Martin Town Hall, building a relationship with our community and offering them a voice or a place to talk in a way that others weren't doing. Similarly, when we did the show You For Me For You that I was talking about earlier, it was during the election, and so we turned the post-performance into an election night party. You can see we have American flag-themed cupcakes and balloons and bunting, and we just set up some TVs, kept the bar open, invited people to stay, and we had about, you know, I would say about 60 to 80 people stay and watch the election results roll in. That was really fun. Finally, you know, around the time that the Supreme Court decided to hear the case for marriage equality, so again, this was a couple of years ago, we wanted to do a reading of 8, which was a play written about this case. And then we held an activism fair for marriage equality in our lobby where people could come and learn about all the great work that was being done in our community, get tested for HIV if they wanted, basically just come in and be part of the community. And that, you know, that was an event that sold out in, you know, within hours of being announced because everyone wanted to participate. So that's another way that we've been looking at what it means to activate our space. And then finally, really looking at this idea of building relationships with our community through a number of different ways, panels and partnerships. So holding post-show discussions with members of that are actually led by members of the community around each show. So when we were doing a show called The Convert about colonial, well, what is now Zimbabwe, we actually invited the DC Commission on African Affairs to curate this post-show discussion. Or we did a fundraiser for the Zimbabwe Education Fund where we provided them really low-cost seats so they could sell them as part of their fundraiser. So that's one sort of tactic we've used. We also have a thriving mission-driven rentals business. So the idea is not only to rent out our spaces, but to really rent them out to people who get us and whose brand sort of aligns with us, and to be able to tell them about who we are while we're doing this. So Dog and Pony DC is a small devising ensemble company that often perform in our rehearsal hall. Google and TEDx have held events here. We've had fashion shows. And then we've actually had a few people get married in our building, people who love Woolly, and I think it would be a fun place to have their special day. Okay, so I'll try to get through the stats really quickly. So at the beginning, you'll note I talked about these sort of 4 principles: income, growth, prestige, and belonging. So in terms of income and growth, we have a modest $2,000 to $10,000 towards single tickets and groups goals per show, depending on our sort of audience engagement activities. We've grown our rentals business from about $50,000 in FY11 to about $250,000 a year today. We have sort of very engaged audiences. The data varies from show to show, but on average you could say about 40% of our audiences are 26 to 45. They're very engaged and very excited. And we're growing our audiences quite significantly. 50% of our patrons are new for each show that we do. In terms of growth, this is this is a show we did and that we're doing again called Stupid Fucking Bird, which is an adaptation of Chekhov's The Seagull. And so we created this lobby experience that people were so excited to Instagram and post everywhere. And so the word of mouth really spread, and we really saw growth in sales and audiences through this initiative. So in terms of prestige, this was in the business section of the Washington Post, this article about a year ago when we did Stupid Fucking Bird. Our Woolly Mammoth's digital engagement efforts, a glimpse of the theater of the future. Now, you've heard me mention that that we're gaining a national reputation for our sort of connectivity work, but it's something that is growing. I don't think DC realizes where we are in the national field, but articles like this really position us as quite a prestigious organization and someone to look up to. So that's been really, really exciting. And one thing that I haven't got a slide for, but I'll just throw in here, is that it's so fundable. Everyone wants to know what the results of our experiments will be, and so this fits between prestige and income. We've raised a lot of funds from major foundations around our connectivity work. Okay, so I talked about belonging, and certainly for our younger audiences, we found that there's a lot of love for the work we're doing. So it brings the dramaturgy off the program page in an involving way. Or Woolly's the best, even if I don't love a play. It's always due to the play itself and not for Woolly's efforts. Top-notch actors, creative sets, fun lobbies. I say to my friends, I feel more connected to the theater here than I do anywhere else. And then, you know, sometimes people don't love it. As you can see, they say it's laudable. I don't need it. It has no impact on my enjoyment of the production. I'm just saying it makes no difference to me. But yet, people like to be associated with a theater that's trying new things. We hear that time and again. And they like being associated, excuse me, associated with a theater where the audience looks different from them. Older audiences are generally, who come to Woolly, are generally young at heart and like seeing young people surrounding them at the theater. And that is the end of my slideshow. So we can open it up to questions, and I'm going to try and get back to the screen where I can see you guys.
Thank you so much, Deeksha. I think we have time maybe just for one short question. It's because we've got a line up. We're going to Atlanta next, and we just need a few minutes to line up Atlanta. Any questions for Deeksha? Oh, yes, gentlemen.
Can you come to the mic?
Can you come to the mic?
Hi, Deeksha.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, because of the reputation Woolly Mammoth has got now, are you aware of any other venues, whether they're museums, art centres, heritage places, that have adopted a similar approach and had success with it?
Yeah, actually, we were very inspired by the museum world, which we feel is doing this much more successfully than some of the theater spaces. And one museum that I recommend to you, one thinker that I recommend to you is Nina Simon, who wrote a book called The Participatory Museum. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But she was really a big influence for us because she went over to, gosh, I'm completely blanking on the name of the museum. It's in Santa Cruz, and she really turned this venue around and made it about participation and engaging the community. So that was a big influence for us.
Great, thanks.
I think we're going to have to swap over. So
Okay, we're going to have to sadly say goodbye to Deeksha because we've got another live link on its way. But I'm hoping that if you've got any burning questions, that we might be able to give you Deeksha's email, and she might kindly respond to one or two if you've got burning questions. Would that be okay, Deeksha?
That would be great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deeksha.
Bye.
Right, somebody needs to talk for a few minutes.
Right, okay. Yeah.